Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to the 5th Clinton Global Initiative University meeting. I thank you for being here tonight, and I especially thank President Knapp and the whole staff here at George Washington University who have been so great to put this together. They've done a wonderful job. GW is the perfect host for this conference. More than 200 years ago, President George Washington called for the establishment of a great university to forge citizen leaders. Today, the George Washington University is the embodiment of that vision. Under the President Knapp's leadership, the university has established the Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service to help develop the next generation of public service leaders. And last year, the Stephen and Diane Robinson Knapp Fellowship Entrepreneurial Service Learning was established, a fellowship inspired by the deep commitment to service and community engagement that GW students exhibit every week. I'd also like to thank the sponsors who enable us to have this meeting free of charge for all attendees. The Victor Pinchuk Foundation, the Peter Peterson Foundation, Microsoft, Laureate International Universities, Andy Nahas, Joan and Erwin Jacobs, Peter Kovler, the Prospect Fund, and Booz Allen Hamilton. Thank you very much. Tonight, there are more than 1,000 of you here from more than 300 universities, more than 80 youth organizations, 82 nations, and all 50 states of the United States. You have already made 915 commitments to change your schools, your communities, and the lives of people across the world. You represent your generation, young people who have a greater ability to enact change than any before you. In the past year, more than 30,000 students, faculty, and administrators have become engaged in CGIU's commitments to action. As a result of the commitments in 2011 alone, more than 146,000 people have improved access to health care and social services. Nearly 31,000 students have improved access to education. More than $1 million has been raised for scholarships, humanitarian relief, hospitals, and other worthy endeavors. I am fortunate to see a lot of amazing examples of people taking this kind of action. This September, we'll have the 8th annual meeting of the Clinton Global Initiative, convening heads of state, CEOs, nonprofit directors, philanthropists from all across the world. They have, in 7 years, made nearly 2,000 commitments, which already have improved the lives of some 300 million people in 180 countries. Both CGI and CGIU are global networks of people seeking to use the resources at your disposal to make a difference. But you have something they don't. More time, for one thing. All the years I was in politics, I loved it, but we spent most of our time arguing over two things. What are you going to do, and how much money are you going to spend on it? You're going to cut taxes or put more money into education. What are you going to do, how much money are you going to spend on it? We didn't spend much time on the third question, which I think is the most important question of the 21st century, which is whatever you propose to do, and however much money you have or don't, how do you propose to do it? So that you turn your good intentions into real changes in other people's lives. One of the reasons I think we see so much innovation coming from college students is that you don't have all that money, so you have no choice but to think about the how question. But if you think about it and implement it, you might draw tons of money to it. And really, over the last 10 years or so, one of the most hopeful things about our future is that it is now possible to raise very large amounts of money in very small units. When the tsunami hit South Asia, Americans gave $1 billion. Half of it over the internet, first time. And the median contribution was about $56. When the earthquake hit Haiti, the Americans gave $1 billion. And the immediate contribution was even smaller because you could not only give over the internet, you could simply text the number of your favorite charity, the Red Cross or the Clinton Haiti Fund or whatever it was, and immediately transfer $10. So when we recognize the commitments that are made here today, they are worthy in their own right, but some of them are capable of dramatic expansion or adoption or modification. Creativity is really important. I'll just give a couple of examples of the commitments that have been made this year by you. Christine Schindler of Duke will work to connect female engineering students with girls aged 14 to 17 for mentorship and partnering to assemble low-cost medical devices for distributions to clinics in the developing world. She plans to implement this program in all 40 Engineering World Health chapters worldwide. Why is this important? Because only 14% of America's engineers are women, and only 15% of engineering students in our universities are women. It is well known that the United States has a shortage in the so-called STEM fields, science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. What is not so well known is if we could abolish the difference between women and men in those fields, and the difference between Asian Americans, European Americans, and Americans of Middle Eastern descent, and African Americans and Hispanic Americans, within a few years, our shortage would disappear. Meanwhile, we ought to give immigrants more visas, I think. Shirley Codio of Virginia Tech is committed to replicating the Hens for Haiti model in order to increase employment and food security. She and her colleagues started a very successful egg-laying facility in Haiti, and they want to take it to scale across the country. The country has a serious protein deficiency that can be remedied partly with chickens and eggs, whichever one comes first, and partly by growing their own fish in an environmentally and healthy, responsible manner. You're going to hear later about a student from Vanderbilt University who's now graduated, who started a couple of years ago a program to train offenders who'd been sent to prison and who were in halfway houses, having been released from prison but not into society yet, so that they were employable and then helping to find them jobs. This is a huge deal. People who go to prison and get out, which is more than 90% of the people who go to prison, are much less likely to become repeat offenders if they have jobs. And yet, even though we say we're a people of second chances, and once you pay your debts to society, you're supposed to get one, the truth is that one of the first casualties of the budget crises of the last few years have been the job training and job placement programs for former inmates. This is something that nearly every college or university in America could adopt. So again, I say, don't be discouraged if what you're doing starts off helping a relatively small number of people, because if replicated or taken to scale, it could change the future for a huge number of people. We are going to try to address these challenges step by step, knowing that, as my good friend, former governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, used to say, in politics you campaign in poetry, but you govern in prose. The same thing is true of citizen service. You work in prose. You take one step and another step and another step, and pretty soon you look around and you've walked several miles, and a lot of people's lives are better as a result of it. I thank you for your commitment to take those steps. Now I want to introduce our host, who has worked tirelessly to make education possible for thousands of students, the President of George Washington, Dr. Stephen Knapp. I want to tell you a little about him. He has a long history of supporting students. He was a professor of English literature at the University of California at Berkeley, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Provost at Johns Hopkins University up the road in Baltimore. As president of George Washington, he's made it a priority to increase student opportunities for public service. In order to be accessible and better serve the students here, he chose to take up residence on the campus, the first president of this university ever to do that. Maybe he was just trying to avoid the well-known Washington, D.C. traffic, but it looked to me like he was trying to remain open to the students. He's made a lot of green renovation to the residence, demonstrating his strong commitment to sustainability and trying to make the university a model for sustainability. This kind of complete view of public service, how it permeates every decision he makes President Knapp not just a good president for the students of GW, but an inspiration to people everywhere. Please welcome the president of George Washington University, Stephen Knapp.
Thank you. Thank you, President Clinton, for that very kind introduction. And above all, thank you for the inspiring leadership that has launched this extraordinary initiative. Let's all recognize that leadership if we could. Let's do that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's truly an honor to host the 5th Annual Clinton Global Initiative University. And I'm pleased to acknowledge the presence of quite a number of distinguished guests, our distinguished panelists. We have a number of university trustees of our university who are present here, as well as our presidents emeritus, Lloyd Elliott and Stephen Joel Trachtenberg. But above all, I'm delighted to welcome the more than 1,000 students who successfully competed to participate in this year's CGIU. As the President mentioned, you come from some 82 countries, all 50 states of this United States. You represent some 300 colleges and universities. Now, President Clinton was very kind to mention the fact that the founding vision of our university goes all the way back to our namesake, who dreamed of a university in our nation's capital that would educate the citizen leaders of the very new nation he helped to found. And we have preserved that mission, except that now, instead of training citizen leaders just for our nation, we educate citizen leaders for the world. And at the core of that mission is a commitment to service. It's reflected in the way 2 years ago, First Lady Michelle Obama challenged us to perform 100,000 hours of service during the course of an academic year, and we greatly exceeded that, and so she spoke at our commencement. For the 3rd year in a row, last spring, we sent more students to the Peace Corps than any other school our size, and we've passed the 1,000 Peace Corps volunteer mark this past spring. For the past 4 years, the #1 employer of George Washington graduates has been Teach for America. But in fact, this generation of students is marked by a deep commitment to serve not just at GW, but worldwide. Just to give you one statistic that was published in the Washington Post, in 2010, more than 3 million students in the United States alone, more than 3 million students volunteered more than 300 million hours of service. Now, 2 nights ago, we held a reception for GW students participating in or volunteering to support CGIU, and I was inspired by the variety and creativity of our students' commitments to action. They ranged from a plan to make bicycles out of bamboo, an extreme panda bikes, an extremely inexpensive, sturdy, and renewable material that will really make a difference in many parts of the world. And in fact, they're so inexpensive that this program will be able to donate 1 bicycle for every one it sells. They include a program using art therapy to prevent suicides among adolescents in the Oglala tribe of the Lakota people. They include the collection of unsold food from local restaurants for donation to DC homeless shelters. But in fact, we could multiply those examples 100-fold, and you've heard many examples from the President just a few moments ago, so you realize how much imagination and dedication and creativity has gone into these commitments to action. I'd like to thank the Clinton Global Initiative and the university's Department of External Relations for setting up such a terrific weekend. I urge you all to take advantage of the activities we have in store for you, including the plenary and breakout sessions tomorrow and the service project on Sunday. And let me close simply by saying congratulations to all who were chosen to participate in this weekend's events. You are making a transformative difference in our world, and I hope you'll enjoy your time here at the George Washington University. Thank you. Good luck to you. Godspeed.
I'm going to begin, as we always do, first with the announcement of 2 new commitments, and I'd like to ask the people who made them to come forward. First, a commitment named Pay It Forward. Abe Lopez, an undergraduate at Illinois State, Caroline Chen and Shelby Couch, undergraduates at Michigan State, Christina Lee, an undergraduate at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities campus. These students are all involved in a group called Students Today, Leaders Forever. They are committing to create new programs which will provide community service opportunities for young Americans across the country. Between September of 2010 and September of 2011, just under 25% of Americans between the ages of 16 and 24 volunteered even once. Abe and Caroline will develop community service road trips to new areas of the East and West Coast and topic-specific service tours. Shelby will use her campus resources to bring community service leadership opportunities to public high school students in Lansing, Michigan. Christina will implement an after-school literacy program for multicultural students in inner-city schools to give them access to multicultural mentors. These projects together will help the organization scale up by 37,000 hours of service over the next year and involve a lot more young people in doing this. Let's give them a hand. That's a good idea. Now I would like to invite to the stage Sam King, an undergraduate at Stanford University. He's wearing his commitment's name, Code the Change. Here's the issue. More and more individuals and foundations that donate money to non-for-profit operations want to, understandably, keep down the percentage of the donation that goes to centralized cost, things that don't directly touch the intended beneficiaries. That's a laudable goal, but there are certain unavoidable costs for computer systems and technologies, for example. So to better connect the worlds of nonprofit and computer science, Sam will increase the national presence of his organization, Code the Change. It hosts Code Jams, day-long events in which computer science students volunteer up to 24 hours of their skills for nonprofit projects. Currently, Code the Change hosts 6 Code Jams at Stanford every year. Starting this fall, he will expand the program to 10 additional universities, specifically targeting schools with strong computer science programs. Each event connects 30 computer science students with 8 nonprofits for day-long coding sessions. With the proposed expansion, Code the Change will provide 60 additional days of volunteer programming, addressing 480 additional technology needs for nonprofits. It's a good deal. Let's give him a big hand. Now I would like to introduce our panelists. And as all of you know, I'm going to ask them a question or two, and they're basically going to tell their stories in a way that makes it relevant to you and your lives and why you came here, after which we're going to take your questions. So supply us some. First, President Knapp, who's already been introduced. I'd like for him to come out and take a chair. Second, the first woman ever to be Secretary of State of the United States, appointed by some long ago president, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine here is you know what that reminded me of for some bizarre reason? The time we went to Buenos Aires and went to the tango place. Anyway, here's what I want you to know about Madeleine. She is a professor at Georgetown School of Foreign Service, my alma mater. But in her current life, she is a citizen servant, chairman of the National Democratic Institute, president of the Truman Scholarship Foundation, on the boards of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Aspen Institute, the Center for American Progress. Third, I'd like to call out the founder of Carolina for Kibera, Rye Barcott. He wrote an amazing book that some of you are familiar with that happened on the way to war. He co-founded Carolina for Kibera, a non-governmental organization to prevent ethnic and gender violence in Nairobi while serving in the United States Marine Corps. He's a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the Kennedy School and the Business School at Harvard, where he was a Reynolds Social Entrepreneurship Fellow. He lives in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and daughter, and among other things, works in Duke Energy's Sustainability Department as a special advisor to the chairman. I'd like to invite out Sadiqa Basiri Saleem, the executive director of the Oruj Learning Center in Afghanistan. She wins the prize for having to work the hardest to get here and to do what she does. When she was 5, Sadiqa fled to Pakistan during the Soviet occupation and returned to Afghanistan hampered by her own lack of education. To Afghanistan, which was hampered by a lack of education. There are about 30 million people in Afghanistan. And when she came back, fewer than 900,000 children, mostly boys, had any access to education. Along with 3 other women, she cobbled together enough money to begin the education of 36 girls in an abandoned mosque in 2003. Through the Learning Center, she now educates more than 3,400 girls in 6 schools, 200 women at 4 literacy centers, and 120 women in a community college. She's established the Family Welfare Center for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, a domestic violence prevention initiative that serves 14,000. She received her own bachelor's degree in international relations from Mount Holyoke College in 2009. And she founded her nation's first women's community college to train college-age women in management, leadership, advocacy, and lobbying skills. We are all in her debt. Thank you. Our last panelist is a good friend of mine, known to the larger world. I'm his token old friend. Not old friend, old friend. Known to the world as Usher. Usher Raymond IV has been an award-winning artist for more than 15 years, known for his fluid voice and his dynamic dance moves. His acting in film, television, and stage, including a Broadway stint as Billy Flynn in the Tony Award-winning musical Chicago. He's won multiple Grammys for his work, but in addition to all that, he has been a staunch advocate for youth empowerment and education, and has proven to be a powerful force by mentoring young people around the world through his New Look Foundation. In July 2011, Usher held the 2nd Annual World Leadership Conference and Awards in Atlanta, where 500 young people from around the world convened to develop real-world solutions to global problems. He is a very good man who is doing something that someone in his position does not have to do. And I've been down there at his event, and I can tell you, it's not for show, it's the real deal. Please welcome Usher. Mine doesn't, yeah. Somebody shouted, "Marry me." He can't do that. He's got a family. But he likes your applause. I would like to, I want to begin with Rye. So you're in the Marine Corps, and you should tell everybody where Kibera is. What skills did you get in the Marine Corps that got you involved in that kind of work? And how did you decide when you left the stint in the service to do this?
Thanks. How many of y'all have heard of Kibera before? All right. All right. A few hands up. It's located in on the outskirts of Nairobi, Kenya. And it's one of the larger informal settlements. Residents there call it a slum, and it is a slum community. About 500,000 folks live there in an area about the size of Central Park. And I was a junior at UNC Chapel Hill, And I knew that I was going in the Marine Corps because that was really my first calling in life. My father had served in the Marines, and like all of us here in this room, I wanted to make a difference. And the Marine Corps appeared to be a way to do that. And so I chased that dream, and it had a clarifying effect because, when you're at college, you often hear that use this opportunity to discover what you want to do. And I think it's an amazing moment in life to discover what you want to do. But it really helps if you have a little bit of an idea going into it. And so I was able to kind of craft my studies based on my service going into the Marines. This was in 2000, so it was before September 11th. And most of the missions that the Marines were engaged on were peacekeeping missions. And so I wanted to have a better understanding of why ethnic violence happened in the world. And a mentor of mine who was an anthropologist at school told me that, there's only so much that you can learn from books, and if you really want to understand why something happens in the world, you got to go someplace and actually put yourself into it. And so I'd taken some Swahili classes with our starting lineup for the men's basketball team. We were all in class together. And that was important for me because you had to learn some of the local language before going to a place that's very different from your own. And the Marine Corps really gave me, because I was going through training at that time, they really gave me the courage in some ways to go to a place that was very different from my own and confront some of my fears in doing so. And so I rented a small 10 by 10 foot shack in Kibera with a young person who was about my age, and I just asked questions and I just listened. Listening, President Clinton asked what some of the skills were from the military that translated to the NGO world. Listening was not one of them. Listening is actually a skill that translated from NGO work to the military and what we can do better on in the military. But I wasn't intending to start an organization. And what I realized in these really difficult conditions was a fundamental truth in the world. And that is that talent is universal, but opportunity is not. Talent's universal, but opportunity is not. Yeah, it's really a truth. And so the question is, how do you best connect that talent with opportunity? And I didn't know what the answer was, but I continued to form some relationships. And over many years, we built an organization called Carolina for Kibera. One of our co-founders was a neighbor of mine named Tabitha Festo. And she was a former nurse. She was widowed with 3 kids. And towards the end of my first summer, she confronted me. And she asked me for 2,000 shillings, which was about the equivalent of $26. And I had made a habit of not giving out any money in Kibera, in part because I didn't know where to begin, in part because I for my own safety. And so I asked her what she was planning to do with it, and she said, "Well, I'm gonna sell vegetables. I'm gonna sell veggies here in Kibera. I'm gonna sell them across. I'm gonna buy them here in Kibera. I'm gonna sell them across town in a Somali community where I can undercut the competition." And so she looked at me and she said, "Believe in me." And she had a plan, and I was leaving the next day, and it was only $26. And so I handed her the 2,000 shillings. I came back to the United States. I went to boot camp for officers, officer candidate school in the Marines. And then I went into my senior year. And as I was going into my senior year, this line from the Marines kept sticking in my head. And the line was, have a bias for action. A bias for action. And what I was doing back at school was I was writing this research report, this thesis. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't giving back anything to this particular community where I'd fallen into some relationships that mattered. Long story short, I decided to start an organization. We called it Carolina for Kibera. It was in my dorm room, my 10 by 10, in my senior year, about midway through it. And initially the goal was really use sports, particularly soccer, as a way to bring different ethnic groups together. And we raised a little bit of money, and we returned to Kibera. The Marine Corps gave me 3 months of unpaid leave to do this, in part because I think most of the military commanders that I served with had an appreciation that preventing violence, the cost to prevent violence, are always so far lower than the cost to intervene during it. And we see that today for sure. I returned back to Kibera. I had no idea whether or not I'd see Tabitha again. I barely remembered her from the previous year, but she found me. And she found me and took me zigzagging through these alleyways to her own 10 by 10. And what she had done is she had taken her savings from selling vegetables for 6 months of about $100 and pursued her dream. She started a small medical clinic out of her shack. And she was a nurse, and she was offering quality care, and it made a lot of sense for us, for her to become a part of our organization, Carolina for Kibera. And as we grew it together over many years, taking what we call a participatory approach, she grew that clinic. And today that clinic treats over 40,000 patients a year. 40,000 patients a year. And I'm going to wrap up, but it started with $26, but $26 in the hands of a remarkable person working in partnership together, taking a long view, taking a participatory approach over 10 years. And when I step back and I think about being in your shoes, I remember just feeling so overwhelmed by the number of options that that you all have in school. And I still think, real change, real social change in particular, it takes that depth of commitment to a particular place. And that's what I hope that you'll be able to find with the causes and the places that you care about.
Thank you. So, Madeleine, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about what you do now. And why it's fun even when you're not a college student. Why you and I do what we do. And what do you want to say to them about what you think their potential is to have a world that's more peaceful than the one we're living in?
Well, thank you, and I'm really honored to be here on this panel. Let me say, I have always tried to look for something that's more interesting to do than the thing I did before. Not easy if you've been Secretary of State. But what I have done is to put the skills that I learned as Secretary of State in terms of trying to solve problems, finding people that can help solve problems, and then do whatever I can to give back. So it's a combination of things. I do believe that one of the greatest problems that we have in the world today is the gap between the rich and the poor. There are, by absolute numbers, there are fewer poor people, mainly because the Chinese have brought so many people out of poverty, but the gap between the rich and the poor is the most serious one. It's wrong, and it's also dangerous. And so the things that I've been involved in are, one, actually, that I was asked to do this by the current Secretary of State, called Partners for a New Beginning, which is to try to get private corporations to work with the government in terms of economic empowerment of people, primarily at this moment in Muslim communities, but to try to get a way to have economic empowerment, science and technology, education, people-to-people exchanges. Those are the vertical pillars. And the horizontal ones is to get youth and women involved. And so we are in a variety of places using the skills of trying to get our corporations to be helpful in terms of creating job opportunities. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the President mentioned, I'm chairman of the board of the National Democratic Institute. You can't impose democracy. That's an oxymoron. But what you can do is try to support those who want to learn the skills of democracy. So through the National Democratic Institute, we're in about 70 countries where we train people in terms of how you form coalitions, how you create campaigns, supporting women candidates, and it allows people to work on behalf of those who need help. I love teaching because I think that it is a way really to talk about what the opportunities are for you all in terms of giving back. My whole life has been about giving back. I wasn't born in this country. I came here when I was 11 years old in order to escape communism, and I have been grateful ever since. And public service, I think, is an amazing way to be able to give back, and I will forever be grateful to this wonderful president who allowed me to be able to use the goodness of American power to make the difference for an awful lot of people, to end ethnic cleansing, to make sure that people had an opportunity to live a free life. And I took those skills now in a way to give back in this way and particularly working with young people. I was in Kibera, actually. I went there for a project with a wonderful program about legal empowerment for the poor. And the part that's poor people aren't stupid. They're very entrepreneurial. They may be more entrepreneurial than a lot of people, and they just want an opportunity. And the kind of things that Rye's doing, that CGI does, that President Clinton has been doing, is giving people who want to make a difference the opportunity to do it, and I hope that I'll be able to do that until the day I die.
I just want to point out that both in my first term, when Madeleine was our ambassador to the United Nations, and American military action ended the war in Bosnia and led to the peace agreement, and in my second term, where we did the same thing in Kosovo, the primary victims that we sought to save were almost all Muslims. And I thought it was very important to prove that the United States meant what we said when we said everybody's welcome here, and we believe in the human rights of people all over the world. And it was just fortuitous that it was sad for them, but it was a fortuitous opportunity that it was our responsibility to stop the ethnic cleansing of European Muslims in Bosnia and Kosovo, and she was great at it, and I thought that was wonderful. So, Sadiqa, I want to ask you, you need to fill in the blanks of the introduction I gave you. A lot of people would hear your story and they'd say, my goodness, the woman was taken out of Afghanistan as a child, and she went back. Then she gets out, graduates from Mount Holyoke, a very distinguished American university. She could have gone anywhere and done anything, and she goes back home to one of the poorest places on earth, where most people think they have poor political prospects. I have always thought that when people say Afghanistan is a dead-bang loser and we shouldn't be involved in there, the British got run out of there, everybody that ever tried to conquer Afghanistan got run out of there, I thought, that's because you shouldn't try to conquer a place. You should try to empower the people in the place to conquer their own future. So, A, why did you do it? Why did you go home when you could have taken a pass? Now, B, when you started this, how did you begin and how have you funded the expansion? Tell them a little about what you did and why.
Well, the reason I came to Mount Holyoke, actually, I will be honest in saying that it was my luck that I made it to Mount Holyoke College. But the reason why I went back home, well, the initial reason to come to the United States to get education was to really get education myself and contribute to the cause that is so dear to me. And I see connection, a huge connection between educated people in a proud nation. I strongly believe that it will be the educated people who will be able to move Afghanistan forward. I mean, we have been in war for the past 3 decades. I was born in war, I was raised in war, and I still live in war. And I don't think that war is the solution. I strongly believe that only education is the solution to the whole problem, not only in Afghanistan, but in the region. But why I wanted to, what really made me to really work in the education sector, it could be any sector. And Afghanistan is a poor country, devastated, there are great needs. But then, now that I reflect back, I see that there are questions that has really shaped my mission. The first question, it is coming from an angry ankle, and that is, when I was a child, I was questioning the education that I was getting, the system that I was getting education in. It was a poor refugee school. And then later in life, I was questioned myself. I was challenged by women who did not have any idea what does education mean or how does a school look like. To tell you my story, when I went to my school as a refugee child, it was a school that was established by Afghan community in Peshawar, Pakistan. So basically, my school, it was a huge school for over 3,000 girls, conducted in 2 sessions in the morning and also in the afternoon. But it was not a real school for me as a child, because the real school for me was the school that would look like in Western movies. The school that I went to, it had only 20 classrooms, about more than 30 tents, and a huge playground that was taken all over by classes conducted in dust and open air, including mine. So what I did, I was not a passionate student, and I have not really shared this story, but I'm sharing today. I was an extremely slow student. I was getting a lot of punishment from my teachers, but I was fighting for my class when we had a new blackboard, so we could only enjoy it for 1 week at the most, because senior classes would steal our blackboard. Usually they were of poor quality, they will develop cracks. And then we were even fighting for space, so the way we could identify where our class is, to put stones and make a square and put our blackboard in it. So the school, that was not an ideal school for me, and therefore I was not studying. And one day my teacher, she beaten me so hard that my palm, she was using a stick that had probably a cacti, so my hand started bleeding, and I still have the scar in my palm. And that was the time that I would say by a great lag, that was the time that my father made a decision to take us back to Afghanistan. In Afghanistan in 1994, it was still civil war. The reason my father wanted to take us to Afghanistan was to experience what is life like back home, so that when we return, we're not caught by surprise. So in 1994, when I got up home, one day I was walking in an orchard with my cousins, they asked me questions. Sadiqa, tell me, what does your school look like? How do teachers look like? Is it true that you go to school alone and you return by yourself? I was angry in the first place. I thought that maybe they were making fun of me, but later I discussed that with my father, and my father asked me a different question. Did you notice any school all the way coming from Pakistan to Afghanistan? Any hospital, any clinic, any store, anything? And my answer was no. So basically, for me, it was all these questions that really shaped my motive, that really shaped my mission. And it is easy to criticize things, as I did in my childhood. It's easy to be angry at things. But it's equally important to reflect back and see that, okay, we could be critical, but then I think it's important to answer one question. What can I do to make a change? And I think that was the beautiful gift that my father ever gave us, to take us back to our home where we initially came from, and see that I was way privileged compared to my own cousins when they were living in Afghanistan. So I think it was, for me, that was the beautiful gift that my father had given to us, to take us out of Afghanistan and provide us education, although that was poor, but it really helped me to reflect back and really get things that I could not have received if I were working, if I was living back home. And that motivated me to go to Afghanistan after the fall of the Taliban, establish the first class with 36 girls. And later on, I received proposals from other communities to establish further classes and schools. And here my life is. That is pretty much my vision, to bring education to girls and women in the most remote areas in Afghanistan where they will not have access to education if Oruj will not go there.
Thank you. Usher, anybody gets the kind of reception you did when you came out here and has made the kind of money you've had and has the kind of profile you have would have to set up some sort of charitable operation. But you know as well as I do that a lot of people in your position in the past have done that and just checked the box. And I know you haven't just checked the box. You thought about what you wanted to do. You thought about why you wanted to do it. And once you did it, you went all in. I've seen some of your kids. And I must say, I didn't know that until we did our deal together when you kicked it off that you were perhaps the discoverer of Justin Bieber, which will get you some more points with some of these people. But I want you to tell these young people why you decided to do exactly what you're doing and how you stay involved in it now to make sure it achieves the objectives you want.
Well, absolutely. You would assume to whom much is given, much is required, or there should be a consideration. Well, I kind of flipped that. Because I was given a lot at a very young age by simply someone believing in me, someone encouraging me to move in a positive direction, which a lot of people my age at the time, coming from at-risk environments, underserved communities, didn't really have a lot to believe in. But it was simply someone, a few people actually, who really made that difference and molded me. You know, they say, you know, it's not how you start, it's how you end. But for me, I flipped that too. Ultimately, my entire perspective was a new look on life. It is how you start. It is the seeds that are planted at those very key moments in our lives that truly do make a difference in terms of the outcome. Then, the next step was the evidence. My mother, who at the time served as my manager, we had conversations about the youth in Atlanta. And she sat in the courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia, and observed court cases where children were coming from foster homes and just really were devastated. No track for success, nothing, no one to be there for them, nothing. And it really pained me that there's someone out there who could actually make a difference in our world, and there's no motivation for them. So I began to speak on panels. I began to go to high schools, schools, gyms, anybody that would accept me, and just talk about the evidence of the reality of, you know, having an education, finding a career, recognizing my talent, and now being able to use it as a tool to offer service and at least the hope, the optimistic hope that you could make a difference with your life as well. After that, I decided that I would start a 501c3 and I would really focus specifically on youth. You know, there's many things that we can do, you know. You travel all around the world, you're successful, you go on stages, but I wanted to be remembered for something else other than just screaming fans. You know, I really wanted to make a difference. I really wanted to do something significant with my talent. So I figured I'd be that motivator that motivated me. I'd be the mentor that was able to look out and recognize talent, or either encourage those who had yet to acknowledge the talent that they had. And in turn, it has definitely been beneficial to me. Justin Bieber would be one of the many kids that I've been able to recognize talent in and encourage him to move forward. But as a philanthropist, there was a philosophy. There was the idea of what I just said, that education is so important, so key. Having a talent, obviously recognizing a career, and in turn, offering service as a result of you finding these things. And that is what the New Look Foundation ultimately became. Since then, the reality, the evidence that that seed that could be planted has harvest. And you've actually participated in it. As a matter of fact, in 2006, we had a conversation, and it was pretty motivating. It was odd because here I'd been doing, a lot of work internally, and I felt like, okay, I got my chops up. I'm going to talk to him, and he's going to know what I've been doing. You didn't know who I was as a philanthropist at all. But I thought that was great because that meant that it wasn't fluff. The hard work that I had put into what I had done had touched the surface, and the ground had been laid, the seed had been planted, but yet the harvest hadn't fully come. And that opportunity to have been there with you gave me the opportunity to expand much further than I had even imagined with the Clinton Global Initiative, and we created Powered by Service. Powered by Service led to many, many different campaigns of disaster relief, those individuals who came from underserved communities who were struck and truly affected by Katrina, as well as Rita, and then on to Haiti as well. After that, of course, we made a connection in Africa at your event, and was able to establish another campaign through Nothing But Nets, and then on to the World Leadership Conference in Atlanta, Georgia, which you were there. He's obviously a very supportive man of me, right? Well, little did he know through all of it, he had been a mentor and a motivator from the beginning. And all along, you had planted a seed at a very, very young age where I felt like I could make a difference in my community. Maybe it was through my mother, but through that indication that the youth could make a difference, I felt like I could make a difference. And the New Look Foundation became what it is today, now 12 years later, successfully leading the charge and being a youth voice, and also preparing future leaders with a service mind, of course, because the only thing that I ask is that they be as influential to each other as one was to me at some point. And since then, I hoped to be successful other than just music, and it happened. And we're able to sit here on this panel. And I don't know if he told you guys, we just had a celebration not too long ago for his birthday. You probably saw it. But we were backstage joking. And there's this one little thing that I really hated, that I actually performed in front of the president with it all hanging out. My pants split actually on stage. Not many people can say that they did that. But we've been able to share.
It was not an X-rated split, and he never missed a beat. He did the whole thing all the way through.
But happy that we have been able to share those experiences, and that you've been able to be that motivated to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The reason, there's a specific reason I wanted you all to hear his story. Because this is something you can all do where you go to school and with people. When I was a governor, so this was more than 20 years ago, and my primary responsibilities were public education, colleges, helping people go to college, and generating economic opportunity. I read a study, the name of which I have long forgotten, but this sociologist followed for a period of 20 years these kids who grew up in absolutely horrible circumstances, mostly, They weren't all poor. A couple of them were middle class and their parents were drug addicts. One of them was wealthy. Their parent did some horrible crime. But anyway, they were, and most of their brothers and sisters got in trouble, but these kids had all done great. And so he studied them over 20 years, and he tried to figure out how do young people turn out okay amidst adversity, which is relevant to what you do. And what he discovered was that at critical points in their lives, every single one of them was made to feel by a caring adult that they were the most important person in the world, that they could do something, they could be something, they could amount to something. The one I'll never forget is that there was one young man who was part of 4 brothers, and they were abandoned by their parents who had terrible drug addiction. Their poor grandmother tried to raise them all in a little apartment in New York City. They spent half the night sleeping outside and everything. 3 of these guys went to jail. One of them became a doctor. The one who became a doctor, every day when he walked to school and when he came home, passed one of those kiosks on the street in New York where you sell magazines and newsstand, and the guy there saw him, took an interest in him. He told him when he went to school he could learn something, and he should. And when he stopped him when he came home and said, "Show me your homework." And then when the kid went to school the next day, he'd show the man that he had done his homework. It sounds simple, but what you're doing can change the lives of thousands and thousands and thousands of people, and you too. And you too, so I thank you. Mr. President, I'll let you wrap up and then we'll take questions. We got more than 20 minutes for questions, so I hope we've got them coming in. Tell me exactly what you do to promote student service at GW and how you came to believe it was so important. Tell them, not tell me.
Well, thanks, Mr. President. I have to say that it's rather humbling for an English professor, an English teacher, to find himself on a panel with people who have these kinds of stories to tell. But it's these kinds of stories, I think, that inspire all of us to take an interest in service. I'll give you a concrete example of what got me thinking about this when I first arrived. Within weeks of arriving at George Washington, not quite 5 years ago, I was talking to a student who was an undergraduate, had gone to Uganda, and had noticed that there were young women who had been subject to sexual abuse at the hands of the militia during time of conflict, and were suffering from a terrible trauma and lack of self-worth and all the rest of that. So she founded, on her own, a soccer team called Girls Kick It, which had never existed. None of these women had ever had any experience in athletics before, and all of a sudden they were joyfully involved in athletic activity in a way that formed camaraderie among their teammates, and it was transformative for her, and so she made that basically her life's work to continue that kind of effort. And as I listen to these stories, I do think that there are a number of themes that come together here. We've talked about disparities that exist across the world. We happen to be in a city here, this capital city of our great nation, that has some of the most striking disparities of health indices and outcomes, of income, of education levels, of any city you can point to, probably almost anywhere in the world. And so one of the things we do here at the George Washington University is find ways of engaging our students who live in one part of the town, happens to be part of the town that has fairly high education rates, fairly low unemployment, and we make sure that they go across all 8 wards of the District of Columbia in their service projects, and we formalize that in a number of ways. One of the things we're doing is commemorating every September 11th, not only with a vigil to remember the terrible losses that occurred on that day in 2001, but also to have a day of service where we literally fan out across the entire city and paint schools so that children, when they come back after the weekend, suddenly find that their schools have been cleaned and painted freshly. And they had no idea that students were going to be there doing that for them over the weekend. We've engaged our veterans. We've had a really strong outreach to veterans, and we have actually over 700 of those. We find that they are tremendous leaders. They've got the experience, the dedication, the skills that they've brought back with them that enable them to be leaders within our student bodies. One of the things I've been really impressed by is how our veterans have stepped up to educate younger and less experienced students in the values of service and the discipline of service and the creativity of applying their skills in exactly the way we've been hearing about. At the same time, we're developing initiatives that are a little more formal than that. One is a Center for Civic Engagement and Public Service, and we brought in a person to lead that effort to have a little bit more of a formal and continuous focus on service throughout the year. But we're also launching some activities. I'll mention one that I think is germane to some of the things we've been hearing about this evening. It's our new Institute for Global Women's Issues. And we're doing that under the understanding that if you were looking for one lever to pull anywhere in the world that would simultaneously improve public health, promote economic development, and reduce violence, it's the education and empowerment of women. And so when I hear Sadiqa, when I hear you talk about that, I think that's really critical. So it's a range of things. You know, it's everything from hands-on experience. What really impressed me about this generation of students, Mr. President, I think this is what you picked up on in this whole initiative of the Clinton Global Initiative University, is we've got students who don't just go into activities, they create opportunities for activities. They are entrepreneurial as well as dedicated in their service. And that's a hallmark of this generation that was not true of my generation. We did tutoring, you know, we were involved in political activism on one or another end of the political spectrum. A lot of that was going on in my generation, no doubt also in your generation. But what I didn't see was this extraordinary inventiveness and creativity that goes into the projects that have been chosen and are represented here. Students come to my office hours, and I'll say, and they'll come up with an idea, and I'll say, well, that's great. You probably ought to explore that. If you talk to anyone about that, and the student will say, well, here's my list of endorsements from the city council. Here's my business plan. You know, here's the capital funds I've started collecting for this. That's a hallmark of this generation, and it's reflected in the imagination and creativity you see here, and that's why I congratulate these students, because they're doing something that my generation could not have imagined would be possible. So maybe I can wrap up with that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's, we're going to go to questions now, but the reason I saved him to last is to make that point. When I was at Georgetown in the 60s, I participated in the university's community action program for a semester. At night, I went into poor neighborhoods and went into people's homes that invited me. You know, we tutored the kids, we talked to their parents about their problems, we helped them solve them. That's fine, but I didn't do it a second semester. I didn't go recruit 10 other people to do it. It wasn't institutionalized. And what I've been trying to do with this and with the Clinton Global Initiative at large and with the one we have for the American economy is to convince people that in this century, the definition of citizenship has to include this. It's not just working and being a good parent and paying your taxes and voting at election time. It is doing this kind of work and helping people like her to do it. Okay. Question number one comes from James Lee, and it's for Rye. As students who love dreaming big and discussing ways to change the world, how can we become more action-based?
Love that question. Thanks, James. There's a mentor of mine who's a writer named Stephen Pressfield, and he wrote this book called Gates of Fire.
Great book.
Great book.
Great book.
Yeah. And he was coaching me a little bit when I was working on a book, and I was hitting this roadblock because I was confronting my own fears of how do you get words down on a page. And Stephen Pressfield wrote a short little manifesto called Do the Work. And in this manifesto, it's about the creative process, whether you're starting a business, whether you're starting a social enterprise, an NGO, writing a book, writing a song. We were all speaking about Usher's creative process before backstage. That's a pretty cool moment in my life. But whatever you're doing, Stephen Pressfield concludes, start before you're ready. Start before you're ready. Confront your fears and put yourself out there. There's no shortage of things to care about, right? So choose one that connects with your own life narrative and start before you're ready.
Thank you. This question is for Secretary Albright from Sid Singh. What's the role of the private sector in creating opportunities for public service, especially through cross-sector partnerships?
Well, I think there are so many opportunities because the private sector really has the desire and the need to create jobs. There's no question. In order to make it work, it has to create jobs. And so the private sector working abroad, particularly, which is what I've been involved in, wants to be able to be a part of the societies in which they are operating. And so what they do is provide opportunities for young people to be able to earn a living and to be able to get an education and to get trained. And I think one of the most interesting things recently about the private sector is understanding that it is not just a matter of putting people to work, but also giving them an education that allows them to take part in innovation and be a part of developing new ways of operating within their societies. The other part that I find interesting is that the private sectors operating abroad need to also do good things. So many of them establish foundations, they work on creating schools, and they like to combine with people such as the young people here in terms of getting them involved in it also. So I have learned a lot in terms of how public and private sectors operate together. I think often there's been the thought that they are inimical to each other and that they're not similar interests. And I think we've learned, for instance, that the private sector can do well by doing good. And so what they do in societies is make sure that the healthcare programs are good, that there is education, and they employ women and young people. So I think it's a very important tool that one hadn't thought about before, at least I hadn't. And I think that they want to operate well, and I think we need to take advantage of that.
I agree with that. One of the things that we try to do in my foundation is to work with companies and with governments and hope that we find a way to do something faster, cheaper, or better in a way that will make a business want to incorporate it into the business model, or a government see that it's now affordable to adopt. So I think this is really important. The next question is for Usher from Ferdinand Marbury. What do you think about the power of the performing arts as an education tool in developing countries, in poor countries? Can it help? Should we think about that as a luxury, or should we try to use the culture of performing arts in these countries to promote education? How can it be done?
I think the passion lies in something that is identified in talent, most certainly, but no different than the 4 pillars that I've created through the foundation. It obviously starts with education. You have to have an education, and then identify that talent and allow that talent to offer a career, or either a sustainable career to at least get you to the point where you're able to make a difference. And then obviously leading to service. I mean, it obviously would, or at least that's the hope, that if you are blessed and there is an opportunity to make a difference in your community, then you will.
Sadiqa, here's an interesting question from, I don't have a name, it says from $1 Million Scholar. I don't know. We all want to be that. How can men join the movement to empower women? Do you have male supporters in Afghanistan? And how important is that?
I think definitely in a patriarchal society like Afghanistan, where men actually make decisions for everything, basically everything, men are the key in supporting women and making their dream come true. And I have seen in my life, and I have witnessed in the lives of so many friends, not only in Afghanistan, but worldwide, that women, they do care, not only for themselves, but they care for the world. And they are the ones who are making difference. So I think if I were not supported by my father, and if I were not supported by my husband, who let me come to Mount Holyoke after we were married only for 2 months, he stayed in Afghanistan. He sent me to Mount Holyoke to study and come back and make a change in the lives of women who don't even know what education means and what education could, what kind of difference education can make in their lives. So if I have always said to my father, why don't we have many fathers like you? Actually, I made a complaint, an official complaint. I asked my father, why don't you have a coalition of fathers who should be supporting their daughters so that we keep the ball rolling and really have a huge effect. And I think my father is getting that. I think he'll be soon that hero.
One of the questions I asked you before that you didn't have time to answer, maybe you could briefly tell us, how did you go from your first relatively modest education project to educating so many young girls and then having a community college and then your other training programs? How did you grow this thing? And did you get financial help from others? How did you do that?
Definitely. So I knew that the need is great, but I couldn't do it myself alone. I mean, as a teenager, 14 years old, in grade 9, I couldn't do anything. But I knew that there must be a way to change this perception. And I believe that, the status quo must be changed. So the initial support that I got, it was from my father. I really wanted him to support me in taking me to Afghanistan because I couldn't travel myself alone. And I got a positive note. And then at Mount Holyoke, that helped me develop my leadership skills. I grew in many, many ways at Mount Holyoke, and I was inspired by the founder of Mount Holyoke, Mary Lyon, that she was able to establish this first women's college in 1836. And she didn't have funding. Basically, she had a small pouch, and she was riding a horse, walking into communities, collecting coins. And the students, in return for their education, will bring eggs, butter, milk, and that's how Mount Holyoke was started. So I compared myself with Mary Lyon. I dared to do that. And I said, well, now that the world is paying so much attention to women's rights in Afghanistan, and a lot of support is coming, and a lot of money is coming to Afghanistan, yet women are not able to be benefited, to actually see the impact. And I said, I think this is the right time that one has to start. So at Mount Holyoke, I learned basically what you said, that try not to be intimidated by the threats that you'll see, by the danger or risk associated to your work, but see the opportunities that are available there. Approach those opportunities and use them strategically. So that's why it was a big dream for me to, as an undergraduate student, to start a women's college. But then I shared this idea with my professors at Mount Holyoke College. I got support. I got support from Huntington Public Service Award. It was a national competition all across the U.S. For senior students, seniors in colleges, and it was actually difficult for me to even enter that competition. I felt that I don't have my writing skill isn't that much to compete with American students and write a proposal. But I ended up one of the 2 students who got the award. And then with the assistance of Vital Voices Global Partnership, I was able to get some kind of exposure to organizations that really care about women's education in Afghanistan. And then a Diane von Furstenberg Award that helped me to basically find a building for the school. And then later on, I started writing grant proposals, National Endowment for Democracy, the Liechtenstein Development Services. So it all actually made a difference. And it happened while I was in senior year at Mount Holyoke. Yes, I worked hard trying to meet the deadlines, and that was the important thing. But at the end, I graduated not only with a degree from this prestigious college that I love, and I miss it so much, but also enough fundings to start the Women's College. And I realized that don't intimidate, just do. And there's always time to work and make a change.
Mr. President, question 4 really should be for you. Vinod Gupta has said that education allows young people to learn, earn, and return. What ideas do you have about how every college and university in America, first of all, we know they all have vigorous community service programs now. A lot of schools do this. But not every school has integrated this as part of the core mission of the university the way you have. Is there some way we could accelerate that and in so doing increase the numbers of young people in universities and colleges around the country who do this? In other words, instead of doing what I do, which is try to bring everybody, many people as we can here every year and get them to go home and infect others in a positive way. Is there some way to work from the base of the colleges out and get more people who run universities and colleges to institutionalize this sort of thing?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the impetus for what we're doing is really coming directly from our students. It's really our students who are I think, pushing universities in this direction. It goes back to that sense that I was talking about earlier, where this generation of students really wants to make a difference and really wants to make the connection that has not traditionally been made between what they're doing in the classroom and what they're doing in the real world. And I think what was impressive about what we just heard, really extraordinary story that Sadiqa just told, is the way in which she was thinking constantly about how her leadership skills that she was developing in her college experience were going to be translated into real action. So it's getting that kind of thought process early on in a student's career. It's a little bit like the way we're starting to get students thinking about their careers earlier, not just in the last semester of their senior year, but all along, trying to think about the shape of their lives and connect that with their intellectual experience. You know, the sort of term jargon for this is service learning. I think in many faculty are a little resistant to that because they think what that is, you know, trying to reduce the intellectual seriousness of the classroom and replace it with something that's not as academic. What we're finding, though, is as our students begin to make more and more of these imaginative connections, it's becoming somewhat contagious, and they're really starting, I think, to exemplify how you can take what's going on in the classroom and connect it in inventive ways with real-life opportunities to build things that reflect the skills that they're developing. And I think we're starting to do that more systematically. The impetus comes from students. We have a long way to go, but I've seen a tremendous change in the attitudes of my colleagues just in the last few years in being responsive to that kind of initiative from our students.
Well, thank you. Just very briefly, when I set up my presidential library in Arkansas, the University of Arkansas agreed to establish a graduate school for me that is a school of public service. And there are about 46 such institutions around the world, but ours is the only one that gives you a degree in public service, not public policy. And we have half the time spent in the field doing service projects, half the time. And I find that there are people there we had an older student, non-traditional student, if you will, about 45 years old, from Thailand come back and come because he wanted to know, he was happy to do the academic work, but what he really wanted to know is how he could get the show on the road once he started. So I think time's on your side. Madeleine, you had a couple of questions, but I particularly like this one from Melissa Wong. As students, and this is partly what Sadiqa was talking about with her father and needing more fathers, how do we get older generations involved in our work so that we can motivate more young people? In other words, not that just you and I do what we're doing, but how do we help them more?
Well, I really do think that cross-generational partnerships here are very important. I do think that in many ways young people motivate people our age. I have just been listening to this and I'm blown away, I've got to say. And one of the things, you were comparing classes from before I taught at Georgetown in the 80s, and I was asked by the president when there was a reunion class, how did the students of the 80s compare with the students today? And I said, well, the students in the 80s were interested in their retirement programs, and all of a sudden there was booing, and I thought, my God, I'm addressing the students of the 80s. But what I find is the motivation that the young people have for what we're doing. And I think that what is useful, for instance, there are many programs where older people are going abroad and working with young people in partnership so that some of the experiences of being older are then matched. And I do think that there is a great opportunity for cross-mentorship. It isn't always that the older people can mentor the younger ones, but in terms of the activity and enthusiasm that the younger students have. I also do think, if I might speak for Wellesley, which also trains young women, I think that what is very important is to look at how to do interdisciplinary training. What we have a tendency is to think that one discipline may be the best one for operating in a service, doing public service. It's across the board. You need people that understand health and understand music and understand biology and and religion and work people together. And I do think that older people can have a great partnership with younger people. And I've been to your school, and it's fantastic in terms of people being motivated. I also do think, Mr. President, as that nice two presidents here, is to have the possibility of understanding that you learn best by doing, that it is a great way you should get credit for doing more than just sitting in the library, and that nobody, you know, or really understanding the practical aspect. And what I believe so fully is I believe in democracy, but democracy has to deliver. People want to be able to work and to understand what they're doing and give back. And I think the most exciting thing about everything that you're doing and all these young people are doing is understanding that giving back is the way to make the world work better.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to add something. Sometimes when, well, most of the times as students, when we're in student mood, so we have this plan that, okay, I'm done with my college, now the next thing is, yes, grad school, yes, I'll do my PhD as well, and then I have great plans to change the world. I think that will be too late if we're thinking of getting education ourselves up to PhD and then, going out to the world and saying, hey, I'm here and I want to make a change. Actually, when I graduated from Mount Holyoke College, I was offered a scholarship by Georgetown University, and I dared to ignore, and I dared to say no. I wanted to go really back to home, and I wanted to, because I had done fundraising, I knew my plan, and I wanted to implement. I wanted to deliver before I take more. And I did it. In 2 years of time, it worked. And then what happened? So I went home, I established the school, and then I wanted to be not the sole implementer, but make sure that everything is okay and everything is functioning the way it should. But then our government, the Ministry of Higher Education said that I'm not qualified enough to do so. Why? I'm not 35 years old, and then I don't have masters. So in a way, I had to leave the country back because Avansan still does not offer master's degrees a lot. So, and now it is the Open Society Institute based in New York and also the University of Ottawa that is investing in me to make sure that I am qualified enough to go back and work for the university.
That's good. Let me say, I asked Madeleine to answer this question, but most of the people I work with, not all, but most, the vast majority, are 30 years younger than I am or more. And, I like it a lot. But one of the things that happens to people is just naturally, most people spend most of their time with people that are more or less in their age group, unless they're university presidents or something. And I think to give a serious answer to the question that was asked, my view is to all of you who know you would like some older people because either they can help you raise money or they've got experience or they've got time, you might try asking. I mean, it may be as simple as that. There are a lot of older people who want to feel like their life has meaning all the way to the very end. All the way to the very end. Their idea of retirement may mean that they don't do the job they used to do anymore, but they want to be useful. They want to keep doing something. And I think you would be, if you really are serious about this, you'd be shocked at the number of older people who would tell you yes if you ask for help or guidance or support or involvement, because a lot of times once your hair gets gray and your hearing gets bad, you think nobody wants you around anymore. It's a big deal. And I think, you know, the baby boom generation in the United States and many other countries cannot afford to be mentally or physically as rapidly declining as previous generation of seniors. Otherwise, because we're so large, we will really cramp your style financially and that of our grandchildren. So I think you'd be doing a good thing for society as a whole by getting more older people involved in whatever your endeavor is. Now, we're out of time, but I cannot resist this. First, I'm going to I'll ask one more serious question, and then I'll answer this unbelievable question we got from NJAX on Twitter. But first, a serious question from someone viewing the webcast. It was asked of Madeleine, but anybody else can answer it. How can women like me who want to help women in Haiti and other places across the world actually do that? In other words, I'm one person out here following this. I want to help women in Haiti and other places. Where should I start? If you've never done it, where should she start? What's your advice? Anybody? Go ahead, Madeleine.
Well, I do think, first of all, you have been doing an amazing amount of work in Haiti and are able to get money and support into a variety of areas, so it's important to get with somebody that is doing something. Dr. Farmer, various people that have a project. Or, for instance, the National Democratic Institute. We have been in Haiti trying to figure out how to help people be able to identify their needs and work with them. I think that there are organizations that are the best way to do this. I also do think that there are those, one can go there and be helpful, but the best thing I would say is to get involved with an organization that can direct, because the individual can help the organization and the organization can help them. And then talking about it. You know what I think the problem is? Americans are the most generous people in the world with the shortest attention span. So what we have to do, a lot of people have forgotten about Haiti. It was very much in the news all the time, and now people have forgotten, and things are still not good there, and they need to operate through your kind of an organization.
Let me just say this. Haiti has, second only to India, the largest number of NGOs operating there per capita of any country in the world, next only to India. Now, it's much smaller, but there are a couple thousand that operate there, and a few hundred seriously and deeply. So my recommendation is that you, first of all, figure out exactly what you want to do. If there's an organization you know about, go to that organization's website and see if they work a place you want, and then give them time or money. Or you can go to my foundation, ClintonFoundation.org website, and track it to Haiti and see what kind of things are going on in Haiti right across the board, and you can find an NGO to work with that fits what you care about. We have lists of a lot of them, and you can follow it through, but it's the simplest way to start. I'm going to lose a friend over this, but I'm going to answer this question anyway. This question is from NJAX on Twitter. Usher, what inspires you to do service? Singing the answer is encouraged.
You guys just won't be happy until I do a concert, huh? No, I didn't say no. I said no, No. Truly the evidence that by applying these pillars that I created, that we've spoken about on the panel the entire night, to engage youth at a very young age, to support those who are in need, for youth to be engaged and ask and accept the help. All of those things are what leads me to do the community work that I've been able to do. It is simply the evidence that it's a reality. The very students that I was able to meet when I first started, they're now in college. They've now tracked a career. They now have identified a talent, and they're also continuing to give back to the community. As we've traveled of the world, I've been able to take New Look Youth as far as Nairobi, Kenya. She went, actually. She was, and actually be able to go all over the world and truly make a difference by identifying the similarities between the issues that are in our communities, not isolated by the differences. So that is the thing that motivates me. Now you want me to sing it. Okay, here we go. You guys probably can help me with this one too, by the way. Okay? All right. I believe the children are our future. Teach them well, then let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride to make it easier. Let the children's laughter remind us how we used to be. Everybody's searching for a hero. People need someone to look up to. I never found anyone to fulfill my needs. A lonely place to be. So I learned to depend on me. I decided because the greatest love of all is happening to me. I found the greatest love of all inside of me.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.